They lost me. I was willing to engage on all the talk right up until we arrived at Colin Kaepernick land, and it just gets so historically forgetful as to be an ignorant, insulting argument to make to see collusion here, as opposed to, hey, I've been watching drafts for a long time, and woo, Deion was wrong, huh, about his kid? Deion was wrong thinking his kid was the second or third best player in the draft, and we kind of believed him because Deion just kept telling us. And so everybody put him up there. But Jemele, thank you for joining us. And as you've absorbed the coverage, where have you been amused and where have you been enlightened?
Well, the neighborhood race lady has a surprising take here. I don't think this really was about race at all. And I know that, and it pains me to say this only from this perspective, is because I have been as critical of the NFL and its racist undertones and overtones as much as anybody. I am not the one to throw down the cape over the puddle for the NFL because their track record speaks for itself when it comes to matters where race is, if not directly implied, at least it's just sort of floating there right around the atmosphere and their unwillingness to actually deal with it. But in this case, what is crazy to me is that we have turned Shedeur Sanders not being taken in the first round, not being taken when people thought that he should have been, as if he's some kind of freedom fighter and political prisoner. And I'm like, that's not what any of this was about. Listen, it's hard for me. And I know that just because you have, sometimes these things don't go together at all. It's like in the territory of you have a black friend, right? But the person I really feel sorry for is Cam Ward. Cam Ward went number one. Cam Ward was a 0-star recruit from a 2-parent home, because you know how we like to throw that around, right? And on some respectability type of stuff. He is a fantastic player, confident, did all the things, drafted number one. And with the way people have so embraced this narrative that Shadur was done so wrong, it's like they basically making Cam Ward sound like he's Steven from Django. And I'm just like, you don't even know this kid. It's like suddenly he's painted in this light because, the NFL will accept that type of black, but not this type of black. It's like, do you know how many black players went ahead of Shadur Sanders? It's a lot of them, all right? And the bottom line is, maybe we should accept the fact, and this is not to say that Shadur Sanders cannot go on to have a great NFL career, can't do great things, but maybe we, as black people, need to accept the fact that Deion Sanders may have overplayed his hand a little bit. And there's no crime in him infusing all the confidence in Shadur. Listen, I was not bothered by the wrist flexing, by none of that. NFL teams, if you're talented enough, they don't care, all right? They don't. And we have seen this countless times. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens in the second round drafted somebody who has been accused of sexual assault multiple times. But you want me to believe that, like, in the NFL, they make these talent decisions all the time. Boy, if the talent is worth it, they don't give a damn if you showed up in gold-plated everything, flashing whatever, as long as you can play. That's all they care about.
Jemele, I want to get your thoughts here on whether there's a greater sports crime with the customer than arrogance, but I know that Mike Ryan was bothered by what it is you were saying about the coverage on Cam Ward.
It was terrible. This was a 0-star prospect in high school that had built himself up to the number one overall draft pick in the NFL. It is a momentous thing. It is an inspiring story. And you're spending that entire time talking about a 5th-round draft pick. It is so, in hindsight, granted, the benefit of hindsight, why would you do this? Why would you make it about Cam Ward versus Shedeur? Because Mel Kiper had his projections way wrong and you wanted to make television? You should have leaned into the moment. It is such an uplifting story. Cam Ward going from 0-star, a guy that ran the wing T in high school, to Incarnate Word, to Washington State, to a guy that declared for the draft last year but didn't really have draft prospects. He would have been a 5th-round draft pick like Shedeur had he entered, turned himself to number one overall. That is an inspiring story that ESPN should have leaned all the way in on. Instead, we got BS because their main draft analyst felt some kind of way about it. And in retrospect, they could have been talking about any 5th-round draft pick. It was just such a missed opportunity.
Jemele, what do you make of not just that, but also the needs in media to be right, sound right, and defend your position? Because Mel Kiper Jr. went down swinging on I know what I'm talking about, and the NFL has no idea how to analyze quarterbacks because he just insisted that his identity at the end would be, I'm right about this. Everyone else is wrong. And it just ends up tainting the coverage because his voice on it, Jemele, broadcasters do this in a way that's really influential. If people are a little bit mad, they're going to get a lot angry if all of a sudden what they see is a broadcaster with any credibility lighting flames on this is so wrong, this is disgusting, this is disgraceful, when all you're doing is wrapping a cape in. You were really wrong, Mel, in a way that, like, you've rarely been this kind of wrong.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we act like this is, and I'm not trying to throw a shot at Mel Kiper because I generally find him to be a good person. Like I've dealt with him over the years. He's been nothing but kind to me. But this ain't the first time Mel has been badly wrong. All right. And the problem in this case, why it was kind of the perfect recipe for this kind of explosive reaction by a lot of people, is that Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, the entire Colorado story, they brought in a lot of really casual fans, as in people who did not pay attention to football at all or barely paid attention to college football, and certainly not the NFL draft. So between Deion building the hype, between the hype in general just being around this team, there was an expectation already built that Mel Kiper fed. So a lot of people are feeling disappointed, and we're feeling like this was a grave injustice when it's just, if you watched and studied the NFL and reported on the NFL, you understand how this could have possibly happened. I mean, I would even gather to say, if anything, at least among the media, I mean, how fans have responded, and they tend to get blurred together, because there was definitely a huge portion of particular fan bases that did the opposite in terms of treating Shadur Sanders a particular way, and when we know what that is, we know what that element is. Like, they definitely face that. But in the media, if anything, because of the reverence for Deion, I think a lot of people were kind of covering for it, and he got not him himself, but when it came to like really evaluating Shadur's talent, I think that they probably gave him some passes and maybe didn't report as accurately or as honestly as they should have because of who his father was. And
that's crazy.
That doesn't do things a right.
That's crazy. That's crazy to suggest that the media was sort of biased and bought by Deion's charm.
That's on.
I don't know if it's his charm, because I do think what happens in the media, especially, and it can be done sort of innocently enough when you see a fan base reacting, because Shadur Sanders, Deion Sanders, let's be real, they made a whole lot of white folks mad. They made them mad, all right, by the way they presented themselves. Like, a lot of, and there was nothing wrong with how they did, but there was a contingent that was on the hate train because they thought it was overhyped, and all the other narratives that we have talked about when it came to this family. And I think that there were media members who were very conscious of that and understood that that was at play. And perhaps it made them pull their punches in ways, because we saw too much extreme. Just like, there was media in Colorado when Deion had that back and forth with that reporter based off something that he reported on. We saw how Deion, being charismatic and being very, very somebody who understands the media, having been a part of it, we see how he is able to use the media in his favor. I mean, he is. And I think a lot of media members, rather than give another draft pick whose last name might not be Sanders, I think a lot of these stories that we heard about his approach and criticisms about his approach to the NFL, to the combine, to other things, I think those things would have probably been reported and talked about a lot sooner if it were somebody else not attached to the last name Sanders.
Right. I think that was my takeaway yesterday, was if his name was Shadur Williams, but those stories about how he behaved in pre-draft came out, I think the same thing would have happened. I don't know, in a weird way, I don't know how much Deion Sanders had anything to do with what happened to him on draft day, because it seems to me it was more about teams saying, well, this guy's clearly not a serious guy, especially playing that position.
What
Yeah,
you,
I mean,
what you guys
I
are
think that
saying,
there
though,
is-
I'm sorry, Jemele,
Yep.
what you guys are saying doesn't make sense to me. The idea that our information brokers and the people who are mining the data on Scouting Report would just be hypnotized and mesmerized by, well, Deion says he's a top pick, therefore he's a top pick.
It's not necessarily just charisma, though, right? It's intimidation of the local media. We saw it, right? If you're not going to sit here and compliment my kid and Travis Hunter, who I brought in here too, and me, you're not going to be here. I'm not going to allow you into my media space. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to dismiss your questions. It's right out of the Trump playbook. Like, it's the same idea, which is if you are not here asking me the questions I want to be asked, I'm not going to answer them. And the only information that's going to come out is positive. And there were a ton of folks, understandably, excited about the story. We're part of it, right? We just kept talking about how cool Colorado is, how good Shedeur Sanders is, how good Travis Hunter is. Never really breaking down any Colorado games. How many of us were really watching every snap? We weren't. But we were hyping it up because it was an awesome story. And now all of these things, whether it's his personality, whether it's the way he treats his teammates, whether it's the way he treats opponents, all of those things sort of come to light in these interview spaces in a different way than you could get with the media.
The other complicated layer too here, guys, is that I think if you are a Black journalist in this space reporting on this story, there's a different sense of responsibility that's going to be on you than other people. And from that, I mean this, is that because there was a wall of Black protectionism that formed around Deion Sanders and Shadur Sanders, because, that wall was definitely there. And because of that, any criticism of Deion and any criticism of Shadur, especially if you're Black, was viewed as you selling out the race. You selling out, like, oh, so let me get this straight. You allow this to happen, but not this to happen. Like, you have all these words for this. Like, it was one, I don't remember what press conference it was, where I felt like, Deion didn't handle it particularly well, or some of the things he said, I sort of critiqued. And the number of people calling me a sellout or saying that, like, oh, y'all just hate it when a Black man is confident, and then it was like, whoa, where did all this come from? So I think all of that is wrapped up in this, is that I don't think it was a thing. Yes, the media, I totally agree with you. The media got caught up in the story. They got caught up in the hype. And it's a great story. And it definitely was a great story to see Colorado back on the map. And even when he was at Jackson State, it was always positioned as, here is Deion Sanders, this NFL Hall of Famer with all this personality, all this charisma, and he's bringing all that to a Black college, putting them back on the map, making a statement about Black excellence. And once that narrative took hold, criticizing Deion or criticizing Shadur was frankly not going to be greeted very kindly. And I think there were some people in the media who were aware of that, and they may have seen some pink flags in terms of maybe as a prospect, he has some things to work on, and pulled their punches. And thus everybody is wondering, well, how did we get to a situation where I thought he was going to be the second player chosen or in the top 5 to this? And all it could have possibly been is misreading the room. Because if you are a second or third round graded pick and you're heading into the draft process, you have an opportunity to increase your value. If your then game plan becomes, I'm going to tank some interviews because I don't want to go there. I'm going to tell people, hey, I only want to play for certain teams. I'm going to go into meetings and tell them the kind of offense I want to run. What do you think is going to happen? It's like, yes, because if they don't get an opportunity to get to know you and to get to know you beyond what the headlines have been, then they're just going to make up what they assume to be part of your character. And you're going to get this.
That part is funny because Ice Cube's kid, O'Shea, came on with us the other day and was just saying, because his dad said, just leave the set if they're making you wait around for 7 hours. And he's like, I'm not you, Dad, but it appears that Shedeur went in as if he were Deion with the headsets. God almighty, this is funny.
Well, Dan, real quick, though, I think that's such an excellent point. It's something that's been overlooked in all of this. I think Deion played this with Shedeur in terms of advising him, orchestrating
his agent, his coach, his only coach.
Yes, as if Deion were coaching himself. And it's like, yo, man, you have generational ability that was obvious, right? If Shedeur was placed in that category, being a can't miss, surefire generational talent, all the advice you gave him makes sense. But when you still have some work to do and improvements to make, and there's still questions about how you play the position, then you need to approach this a lot differently.
That was your friendly neighborhood race lady.
Jemele, you have covered Florida sports long enough to remember how Deion entered the draft when he entered the draft, making it clear to all it's all about me and money, and that's all it's about, and did this 30 years ago.
Correct. In a time that you could argue was much more conservative. And he did that. And you know why the NFL said, we don't care? Because of Deion's talent. That is why. And so, like, that's why it's hard for me to look at some of these takes that are trying to blame everything on race and culture. And that was the reason with that Shedeur wasn't drafted higher, because the NFL doesn't like a confident man or confident black man. I'm like, well, how the hell did Deion survive? Because, he wore, confidence and swag and all those and bravado. That was his uniform, more so than any team he ever played for. And it was not only made him accepted, it made him beloved. And I think there's just some realities that we have to accept. And, I guess if I may arrogantly speak for my people real quick, it's just some situations we just look at and just say, like, we need a win. And no matter what, we need a W, okay? And I think this was one of those situations where in the secret Illuminati meetings of black folks, they got together and said, you know what, we gonna get this W one way or another. And I'm like, guys, this might not have been the one we should have met about.